When Russia launched its summer offensive in Sumy, it would have felt pretty confident. It had just pushed Ukraine out of Kursk, and it felt like it had the momentum to at least create a buffer zone to prevent anything like Ukraine's Kursk counter-invasion from happening again. But Russia was wrong. Its many mistakes in Sumy since the beginning of summer have cost it an arm and a leg, literally in the case of one of its top Russian generals. Ukraine has just hit that general hard, leaving him maimed and causing the Sumy Frontline to collapse totally. That general is named Ezadullah Abachev, and he was the man that Russia handpicked to make things right in the Sumy region. Russia's goal was simple: stabilize the front by sending a member of the military's high command in to organize the troops. Beyond the loss of a key bridge, which will be covered in a moment, that lack of organization was what was really killing Russia's soldiers. It needed somebody who could help its Sumy forces to reorganize their defenses, thus minimizing casualties and creating potential launching pads for future assaults. Instead, what Russia got was a decorated lieutenant general who's been sent to the hospital with injuries so severe that he'll never be able to command troops ever again. Ukraine's strike against the incoming general happened on the night of August 16 and into August 17. That's when Abachev began his journey from his post in Kursk to Sumy. Perhaps the Russian military was overconfident in the safety of the general as they traveled along the Rilsk-Kumatovka highway. This road artery leads out of Kursk and into Sumy, making it a logical route to take. However, it's also a major road, which makes it an easy target. Still, Ukraine had been pushed out of Kursk, Russia must have thought. Surely it wouldn't be able to hit the Rilsk-Kumatovka highway. And even if it could, Ukraine didn't even know that a decorated general was traveling along that highway in the dead of night to enter Sumy, right? Wrong. As United 24 media reports, the UA Reg team of the Special Operation Forces of Ukraine knew exactly who the general was and where he was going on the night of August 16. They also knew that Abachev, who serves as the deputy commander of the server grouping of Russian forces, was the man they absolutely didn't want to enter Sumy. This was the man who had commanded the 2nd Army Corps of the so-called Luhansk People's Republic back when Putin launched his supposed special military operation. In that role, Abachev had not only organized the pro-Russian forces inside Luhansk, but had also overseen strikes against civilian settlements inside the oblast. Russia's troops were on the ropes in Sumy. The momentum was shifting in Ukraine's favor, and it couldn't afford to allow Russia to bring anybody into its territory who might change that situation. The UA Reg team struck using first-person view or FPV drones. And there's no need to guess what happened from there. Ukraine filmed it all. In a video shared by several outlets, including the Kyiv Post, Ukraine revealed exactly how the attack on Abachev happened. The 1 minute and 11 seconds of footage starts with a video shot by a Ukrainian drone tracking a vehicle as it drives around a bend. Set to classical music, the footage continues as the vehicle makes its way down a straight road. That's when the drone starts to move. In a matter of seconds, it draws in on its target until the vehicle fills the entire frame. Then, static. The FPV drone scores a direct hit. The video then cuts to footage being shot by another drone that showcases the aftermath of the attack. The Russian vehicle is seen stopped on the road with what seems to be its front passenger door either opened or blown off its hinges. Ukraine's second FPV drone slowly circles the vehicle, perhaps looking for the exact position of its target and providing clearer shots as it does. It's clear the doors have indeed been opened, presumably by passengers trying to escape. The drone also captures a shot of the vehicle's plates, demonstrating that they have Russian military markings. A foolish choice that gave the game away, considering the value of the target inside. The drone continues to circle, recording the wreckage of the vehicle before it too descends. A second hit. Abachev stood no chance. Despite what might be implied by the footage of the vehicle with open doors, Abachev didn't make it out in time. The main intelligence directorate of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense took to Telegram to explain what happened to the Russian general next. Abachev isn't dead, but he may wish he were. Amputation of arm and leg, General of the Occupation Forces Abachev received serious injuries, the Telegram Post declares, before it provides more details about the attack. The wounded man was urgently taken to the Vishnevsky Central Clinical Hospital in Moscow by military transport aircraft. As a result of his injuries, Abachev had his arm and leg amputated. The Intelligence Directorate capped off its report with a warning. The General Directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine reminds that there will be fair retribution for every war crime against the Ukrainian people. A war criminal is precisely what Abachev is, at least from Ukraine's point of view. United 24 provides a brief overview of the general's career, noting that he was born in Dagestan and graduated in 1989 from the Kharkiv Guards Higher Tank Command School. As may be evident from the mention of Kharkiv, which is a Ukrainian oblast today, Abachev was a product of the late stage of the Soviet Union, and it appears that he holds no love for the country that helped him to begin his military career. After his graduation, Abachev began rising through the Russian military's ranks, resulting in his enrollment in the Combined Arms Academy of the Russian Armed Forces. Graduation from that academy came in 2002, after which Abachev served in a number of senior roles within the Russian military. He was once a brigade commander, United 24 says, and he also served as the Chief of Staff of the 5th Combined Arms Army of the Russian military. Abachev fought in the Second Chechen War, the 2008 war between Russia and Georgia, and was involved in Russian operations in Syria, Azerbaijan and Armenia. When Putin launched his invasion, Abachev played a key role in Luhansk, as already mentioned. That's where his war crimes were committed. Ukrainian civilians died thanks to the orders he gave in Luhansk. It's not known precisely how many civilians died due to Abachev's actions. However, the figure may be in the hundreds. According to a September 2023 report by the United Nations Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner, Luhansk and the nearby region of Donetsk had experienced 10,611 civilian casualties about a year and a half into the Russian invasion. That amounts to 6,324 injured, 4,287 killed. Abachev may not have been responsible for all of those deaths, but his efficiency in helping Russia to overrun Luhansk means that he bears responsibility for the bloodshed. And now, after what Ukraine just did to him, that responsibility carries a very personal cost. And the worst of it all for Abachev is that he was never meant to be making his way into Sumy in the first place. If everything had gone according to plan for Russia, he would have remained stationed in Kursk, far enough from the Ukraine war's front lines to feel relatively safe. Instead, he ended up maimed on a highway leading into Sumy and is now languishing in a Moscow hospital. His career is in tatters, his body destroyed, just another man ground up and spit out by the meat grinder that Putin has created in Ukraine. How did Abachev even end up in this position? There was an interesting chain of events that had to happen for the unfortunate general to find his way into Sumy in the first place. It all started on August 1st, which is when Sensor.net reported that a Ukrainian Air Force pilot managed to destroy a bridge in the Yunakivka region of Sumy using a bomb dropped from a MiG-29 fighter jet. Footage of that incident seems to reveal a fairly nondescript operation in which a bridge crossing a small river is blown to pieces. However, it's not the bridge that matters here. It's the effect the loss of that bridge had on Russia's push into Sumy. Once that Yunakivka bridge was out of commission, Russia had lost one of the only land-based pathways it had into the oblast. Vehicles couldn't cross that bridge anymore, meaning no more mechanized units could reach the Russian forces stationed on the other side. Soldiers could still get across if they were able to wade through the muck-filled river that the bridge crossed. But that's a dangerous prospect in its own right. Strong currents and a deep river can mean a death sentence for a soldier carrying weapons and a heavy rucksack. As Euromaidan Press put it in an August 25 battlefield report, this bridge was critical for Russian mobility, serving as a potential route for flanking Ukrainian positions. With it gone, Russian troops found themselves trapped in unfavorable positions, stripped of the ability to maneuver and flank or encircle Ukrainian forces. In other words, Russia's entire Sumy strategy was thrown into disarray by the loss of this one bridge. It seems that Russia hadn't bothered to come up with a plan B for what it would do if Ukraine chose to bomb a very obvious target, resulting in Russian soldiers on the other side being exposed and vulnerable. Those soldiers were supposed to be getting backup that would allow them to encircle Ukraine's positions. Instead, they're the ones who are getting surrounded and being picked off, unit by unit, thanks to Ukraine's counterattacks. That initial bridge-busting operation has allowed Ukraine to establish strict fire control over the Russian military's ground lines of communication, Euromaidan press adds. And that makes sense. There are other supply routes into Sumy beyond the bridge that Ukraine destroyed. The problem Russia faces is that Ukraine knows all about these routes. It's taken out the most important of them, meaning it's now able to focus its drones, artillery and airstrikes on the other routes. Now that Russia can't get its mechanized assets into Sumy, the Russian soldiers attempting to traverse these alternate routes have approximately zero protection. They're being forced to march without armor, and Ukraine has been taking every advantage of that fact. With the bridge out of commission, Ukraine was able to split the Russian force grouping in two. Any Russian plan to outflank went up in smoke, with this splitting of its forces allowing Ukraine to take out the smaller of the two groups first before doubling back to focus on the larger of the groups. The results have been devastating for Russia, as Euromaidan press reports. The Ukrainian General Staff confirmed that fire control zones now effectively block Russian logistics, evacuation routes, and reinforcement corridors, leaving isolated Russian positions to shrink under relentless pressure, the outlet says. It's often said that pressure makes diamonds. That's not what's happening in Sumy. Ukraine's constant pressure is just creating a whole lot of Russian casualties. Abachev was being sent to Sumy to solve this problem. He was supposed to be an organizational force, a general with proven combat experience and a penchant for the suffering of Ukrainian civilians who'd be able to get Russia's Sumy forces back on track. That's not going to happen anymore. And that leads to the impact that Ukraine's expert hit will have and is having on Russia's Sumy forces. For one thing, there is a very clear lack of the coordination that Russia needs to exhibit if it's going to stand a chance of gaining any more ground in the Ukrainian oblast. As Euromaidan press puts it, the loss of such a high-ranking officer in the middle of a crisis further cripples Russia's ability to coordinate, delaying its already faltering attempts to restore cohesion to the front line. Bear in mind that these forces were already uncoordinated following the chain of events that led to Abachev's severe injuries. And even before all of that, they weren't the most organized group of soldiers in the world. None of Russia's troops are. Organization has been a major problem for the Russian military throughout the Ukraine war. The Foreign Policy Research Institute highlighted this long-standing issue in a March 2023 article. Philip Vasilevsky, who authored the piece, said that Russia's organizational problems stem from the combined issues of a failure to communicate accurate information to its troops and an unwillingness to decentralize the top-heavy decision-making that leads to inaccurate information being spread in the first place. Endemic corruption and brutality, both societal and within the military itself, have also played a part. But the key takeaway is that Russia's military has always been more ragtag, at least on the coordination front, than it would want the world to believe. The unwillingness to decentralize decision-making authority is symptomatic of over 5 centuries of Russian autocracy, Vasilevsky writes. It's why Russia lacks an effective non-commissioned officer (NCO) corps and has a top-down command and control system, which is slow to provide timely direction to forces at the front. The Russian way of war, he says, isn't conducive to modern warfare, and Putin's adherence to outdated modalities and structures has played a huge role in contributing to Russia's high casualty count, which has reached 1,077,830 as of August 26. The Center for Strategic and International Studies, or CSIS, made a similar point over 2 years later. It also notes that Russia's battlefield performance has only suffered due to its tremendous losses over the last 3.5 years. The Russian military has also faced challenges with force quality and the loss of experienced officers, CSIS says. In spite of heavy losses, the Kremlin has likely pinned its hope of winning on a US decision to end its military assistance to Ukraine. Russia is now relying on the US to bring about the end of Putin's war. That's a crazy turn of events in its own right, and it reveals how much of a paper tiger the Russian military ended up being. However, the key point to take away from what CSIS writes is that Russia has been losing experienced officers and commanders throughout the war. Abachev is now one of those lost commanders, a man with close to 4 decades of experience, one who was able to bring organized brutality to any Russian advance, now lies in a Moscow hospital, missing an arm and a leg. Think about what that will mean for Russia's Sumy offensive. Sure, Putin may find another general to send into the oblast, but how many people like Abachev does he have left whom he can spare for that offensive? It can't be many at this point, and anybody Putin does try to send will have a target on their back, just as Abachev did. The sad reality for Putin's Sumy forces now is that they'll have to remain unorganized, directionless, and a divided force that attacks on command without any real structure and is in the process of being wiped out thanks to Ukraine managing to cut them off from their comrades and, crucially, their mechanized equipment with the destruction of the Yunakivka bridge. And Russia's forces are already feeling the impact. Sumy hasn't been going well for them for a while. In late June, about a month into the Sumy summer offensive, Russia's forces had already been stalled out by Ukraine's defenders. Euronews reported on comments made by the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian military, Oleksandr Syrsky, around that time, who said, "Based on the results of May and June, we can say that this year's wave of the enemy's summer offensive from Russian territory is faltering." Putin had dedicated 50,000 soldiers to that offensive, so having it halted in about a month was already a terrible result for a campaign that was supposed to see Russia create a buffer zone between Ukraine and Kursk within Sumy. Since then, Ukraine has been battering Russia's forces in Sumy. On August 10, the Moscow Times reported that Ukraine had liberated the Russian forces from the Sumy village of Bessalivka. Ukraine eliminated 18 Russian soldiers during that liberation, and it's these types of counter-offensives that have defined the Sumy summer offensive since Ukraine brought it to a halt in June. 6 days after the retaking of Bessalivka, Reuters wrote that the Ukrainian military claimed that it had pushed the invading Russian forces back by 1.2 miles, with fighting taking place in villages that were between 3.1 and 4.3 miles away from the Russian border, respectively. That handful of miles is far lower than what Russia would have hoped for at the start of the summer. Now, with Abachev maimed, there is practically no chance that the Sumy situation is going to get any better for Russia. Its troops are divided, disorganized, and have now lost the chance of regrouping under the leadership of a lethal general. In fact, the situation is going to get a lot worse, as Euromaidan press explained. With the smaller Russian foothold in the northwest steadily collapsing, Ukrainian forces can soon start pressing toward the larger concentration of Russian troops northeast of Sumy, striking from multiple flanks, it says. Ukraine isn't on the defensive in Sumy anymore. It's attacking hard, and there's nothing that Russia can do about it because of the attack on the Yunakivka bridge, which has strangled its logistics, as well as being the incident that ultimately led to Ukraine taking out Abachev. And in this situation, the only thing that Russia's Sumy forces can do under the Ukrainian pressure is wilt. On August 5, Russia experienced a devastating day of losses when Ukraine killed 334 of its soldiers and wounded 550 more when repelling an assault within the Sumy Oblast. Without leadership and its mechanized units, all of which the Russians have been deprived of during the last week, the odds are there are likely to be even higher casualty rates. Russia has to face a simple fact: the momentum has shifted in Sumy. Russia's last desperate attempt to prevent that from happening by sending General Abachev into Sumy has failed. The bold summer offensive into Sumy has ended in defeat, and Russia is now in damage control mode as Ukraine advances. And not helping matters for Russia is that Ukraine won't stop conducting powerful deep strikes on its territory. Oil, gas, and every military target Ukraine can locate is going up in smoke, with the most recent of these strikes going a long way to destroying Russia's war piggy bank. Find out more about these strikes and how they're further weakening Russia in our video. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to the Military Show for more coverage of the latest developments in the Sumy Oblast.